taking hobbies seriously helps grow us spiritually. So it's a spiritual growth book about the inner life and our interior faith and the character that develops as Christians following Christ when we take our hobbies seriously.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the 3 Books from Hearts and Minds podcast. My name is Phil Schiavone with the CCO, the Coalition for Christian Outreach, where we're transforming college students to transform the world. And with me today, hailing from Hearts and Minds Books from Dallastown, Pennsylvania, the host with the most to say about the books you ought to be reading, Byron Borger. I was going to see how long I could hold it in honor of the World Cup and, go, Byron, are you into the World Cup at all? We didn't talk about this yet.
I am not following the World Cup. I'm ashamed to say I think I'm the only person on the planet that is not. But I'm not. I just have to admit it. My wife is following some things. Our staff talk about it. I read the little social stuff, particularly these little stories about different groups, honoring each other and certain teams that other unexpectedly fans in certain cities like. And so there's some really neat human stories happening. And of course, I'm mad that our president got involved and tried to change the rules of the game. Bully that he is. That's like so wrong. So I'm a sports fan, but I haven't been watching this as close as I ought to be. But I know it's a fun time. It's also baseball season. Yes, middle of summer here already.
Middle of summer. I love the World Cup. I haven't tuned into every minute, and we don't have the right app to tune in. We do have an app that gives us the Spanish broadcast of the World Cup.
Wow.
And my wife is a little fun fact here. My wife is fluent in Spanish. I don't know if you knew that. She's fluent in Spanish, and she's been using an app to teach our 6-year-old Spanish at night before they go to sleep, which is really fun. And so we kind of are entertained with the rolling of the R's, and of course the goal. They hold out the goal yell celebration.
Yeah.
And I always love the international aspect of it, of just the different cultures and flavors of what this game can look like. And that's part of the fun of summer too, is being able to get outside and play some games and then enjoy. We've talked about birding and stuff like that out there today or in previous episodes. So yeah, I love summertime for all it's worth, for all of its weather and birds and recreation. And based on your most recent book notes, you're a fan of this too, to a certain degree. What do you got for us here today, Byron?
I love the summertime. I also like the spring when it's not raining too much, and I love the fall. I love sitting outside to read. Of course, it's about the only thing I do in my free time is read and watch Netflix. But I got 3 books this time that is sort of like my last book notes that we did, where I'm going to talk about 3 books about play. About recreation, about the outdoors, about fun stuff you can do in the summertime. None of these things are uniquely summertime things, as we will see, but they are about play, about recreation. I'll say right from the outset, Phil, there are this movement within the CCO. We teach our college students to think Christianly with a renewed mind, reading about their academic disciplines, being a doctor who thinks about medicine Christianly, or to think theologically about the nature of politics if you're a Christian in public life, or economics or art or aesthetics or engineering. And so as Christians who are not just people that go to church who happen to be an engineer, but being Christianly approaching the practices and thoughtfulness of being an engineer. So I like this idea of thinking Christianly about stuff. Particularly taking the theories of different academic disciplines seriously. Well, one of those academic disciplines, and we're not going to talk about it today much, but just for the record, is the academic sociology of leisure studies. Dordt University Press, of all places, a little Dutch Reformed college in the Midwest, has a little publishing house, and they've done 2 volumes of papers that were developed at the Conference of Christians who do leisure studies. It's like part 1 and part 2, and they have fairly boring covers and they're academic papers, but there is this kind of rich conversation happening mostly amongst leisure sociologists, and sports thinkers at Christian colleges that think about athletics from a Christian perspective. What is competition? What is play? What is playfulness? What is recreation? What is leisure? And so there's this whole kind of genre of leisure studies. Baker Academic did a study on leisure studies books that is the cream of the crop in that field. So there are these academic ones that are studying this field from a Christian perspective. I just think that's kind of cool. People that write articles for the Christian Scholars Review and things like that. But for ordinary folks that don't want to study leisure academically, but just want to develop that side of their life, I got 3 incredible books to talk about. The first one is a book unlike anything I think I've ever seen. I don't know of any book like this. It's from a conservative evangelical perspective, so it's a Bible-believing Christian orientation around the theology, get this, of hobbies. It's asking how hobbies can honor our humanness. We're made in God's image, and so we're supposed to take wonder and delight and curiosity and all sorts of things, and play can help us do that. So it's called Created to Play. The author is Brianna Lambert, and the subtitle is How Taking Hobbies Seriously Helps Grow Us Spiritually. So it's a spiritual growth book about the inner life and our interior faith and the character that develops as Christians following Christ when we take our hobbies seriously. Now, for some of us, you don't think of that necessarily being play, but she has a little bit about playfulness and the aesthetics of play and the richness of childlike openness that you experience in playful moments. But then she zeroes in on hobbies. And here's what I want to tell our listeners here at 3 Books. That after the chapter on rediscovering play, what she does is she takes a whole bunch of different hobbies and she groups them by different categories. And so here are the categories, for instance. The first one are the makers, people that like to make things, and their particular hobbies are things like, and then in each chapter, she gives you examples. So the first chapter of makers is artists, crafters, crocheters, needleworkers, quilters, soap makers, painters, cake decorators, miniature dollhouse creators, jewelry makers, woodworkers, sculptors, model railroad builders, candle makers, poets, songwriters, musicians, magicians, costume designers, 3D printers. There's just photographers even. She puts all these kind of people that like to make stuff, and their deep joy that she has for every chapter. It's almost like the Ignatian spirituality thing. Where do you see God in your day? Or maybe an Enneagram thing. The deep joy that you find in that, she says, is bringing something into existence. So it's people that like to bring stuff into existence by making candles or being cake decorators, being sort of makeup enthusiasts. I mean, there's all kind of hobbies that people have about decorating and creating. Obviously, singer-songwriters that make music, or painters, people that dabble in the arts. The key temptation, though, is the other thing she has in each chapter. So again, like spirituality, you say there's something that could be your strong point, your sweet spot, the stuff that gives you delight, but there could be a downside to that if you obsess over it or work on it too much, it could lead to certain sins. So she's sort of analyzing in each chapter what is good about that particular hobby or that grouping of hobbies, and what could be the downfall or the key temptation. And for her, it happens to be, for this chapter, she says it is despair. And she explains why that is. The next chapter is called The Heralds. Heralds, people that are singers, musicians, photographers, joke tellers, storytellers, book Instagrammers, reviewers, social media users, even people like Sunday school teachers that have a vocation of being a professional educator, but people that like to teach. And again, expressing beauty is a key joy. But the key temptation could be, for these particular people, she names it as envy. A really interesting chapter, which I enjoyed. The next chapter is called The Nourishers. And these are people like bakers and cooks and meat smokers and sausage makers, cheese makers, brewers, bread makers. Anybody have a hobby of being like a home barista? Winemakers, of course. Even freeze-dried stuff. There's enthusiasts and aficionados of people that like to freeze-dry all kind of stuff. And she says the deep joy is in nourishing a soul, but the key temptation could be pride. So you sort of get the drift. How she finds something really unique about spiritual development and formation in these groupings of hobbies, and you find a key temptation. Then she has one called the movers. And these are like kayakers and swimmers and cyclists and horseback riders and mountain bikers and ball players and weightlifters and rock climbers, of course, Pilates enthusiasts, fishing enthusiasts she puts in here too, wrestlers, all kind of backpackers, people that like to get out there and bicycle, things like that, runners, of course. And the deep joy, she says, is striving, that's a phrase she uses, with your body. So you're using your embodied capacities in your creatureliness to strive with your body, weightlifting or whatever. And then the key temptation, she calls it gluttony. You often think of gluttony as eating too much, but you can be a glutton in overdoing certain kind of physicality, and she worries about that a little bit. She looks at keepers that are like, if you're plant collectors, animal shelter volunteers, farmers, dog trainers, beekeepers, certain kind of aquarium owners, farmers, houseplant collectors, people that are into succulents, people that breed animals, gardeners, of course. And so you can see she's grouping all kind of wild hobbies. There's storers, that would be people like furniture flippers or bicycle mechanics or antique restorers, people that fix stuff up, computer enthusiasts that like to repair computers. I have a friend that just loves repairing stuff like that. Car repair guys, mechanics that like to just work and fiddle on their cars, buy old cars and fix them up. So the restorers, they restore the broken. What a glory that is. But they can be self-reliant too much because they know how to fix stuff. So they almost can cut themselves off and be too independent. There's people that are connectors, she calls them. There's people that are historians. That's people like antique collectors or reenactors. Anybody that does historical reenacting, history buffs, genealogists, they just love that genealogy stuff. So the historians, the beholders are people that are like tourists and campers or even foodies and bookworms, people that like to just behold the glories of other stuff, music lovers and art appreciators, not so much arters that dabble in painting, but they like to go to museums and stuff, astronomers, bird watchers, film buffs. So this is really pretty cool. Do you see yourself in any of those? What kind of category of hobbies do you have mostly, Phil?
Yeah, so for me, that's funny because my mind was going to a slew of friends and former students. I've got one former student that's like in the Ren Fair every year. So I was thinking about, acting and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think was it Nourisher, right? Like I've been dabbling in writing and I teach Sunday school, right? Like with my free time, right? With what free time I have. But of course, I love outdoor games and competing. So a little bit of that striving and the body, getting the body moving, which I've been able to do a little bit more of lately in my own like chronic pain progress, as I've said on here a little bit. So definitely in those things, and a little bit of that artisanal aspect of I enjoy cooking every day. I enjoy engaging with baking and cooking with my oldest daughter, who has a penchant for cooking and cake decorating. And my aunt actually paid her to bake a cake for Christmas this last year, which was so generous of her. She didn't need to pay her, but to encourage the gift and to say this is worth something. And so, and that's what I think I love about this is it sounds like this book and this exploration is gently saying, no, this doesn't need to be a side hustle. It also doesn't need to be just a guilty pleasure, right? That's the camp I was in early in my faith was, well, I'm on this plan to evangelize, and board games are a luxury, or baseball is a luxury, movie watching. That's a luxury. It's not tied to my faith. It's just something else I get to do when I'm not evangelizing, when I'm not reading the Bible, when I'm not praying. I love the way that she's spiritualizing, giving the pros, giving the cons, helping us walk a faithful walk to it, not just this. It just happens to be something else that I do.
Yep. She says that God can bless your board games. there can be something really spiritually alive and human and good going on there when you're connecting with other people and playing Risk or whatever. And there's downsides to it too. You don't want to obsess about things. You can be tempted to pride or overly competitive, whatever. Well, anyway, this book, Created to Play, I don't know any book like it. She does tend to, you and I might understand this, and maybe people in the CCO listening to this might resonate if I say this. It seems to me she might overly spiritualize things just a little bit, like working to make them a little too uniquely spiritual and look for the blessing instead of just saying in God's common grace, God wants us to be human and have fun. And so it's just a joyful thing we do. Get over it. You don't even have to have a reason. It doesn't have to be spiritually enriching. But yet she shows that it can be spiritually enriching. So, this notion of even needing a book like this is itself interesting, because there's so many people that downplay our hobbies or our sports, or they view them, as you just said, sort of as a luxury that we just do, but we think about it faithfully. And we don't all have to do leisure studies and think Christianly about aesthetics and play professionally. But gee whiz, we can sort of think a little bit more by reading one book about something that turns us on, whether it's watching TV or playing board games or playing Ultimate Frisbee. So I'm excited about this book. I think everybody should get it. I'm enthused about it. I'm a book lover and a beholder myself. So there you go. There's one good book. Now I'm going to focus on the next book. With people that know me know they've heard me talk about this before. I don't know if we've talked about it on the show here, but on this episode, I've got to talk about an older book that means so much to me because the author is one of my best friends. His name is Ethan Bryan, and Ethan Bryan lives out in the Ozarks in Missouri, and he wrote a book called A Year of Playing Catch. A Year of Playing Catch. What a simple daily experiment taught me about life. The book begins when on New Year's Day, he decided to go out and play catch in the bitter cold. You can do some of these hobbies indoors in the winter. You can play catch in the winter. He goes outside on a winter day to play catch with his daughter. And he's a baseball fan. He plays catch. He throws the ball back and forth. They talk about meaningful things. And he says, my other daughter wants to do this. So the next day he decides to do it with his next daughter. And pretty soon he kind of gets this idea. He's sort of on a roll. He does it the next day with somebody else. And he realizes he could do a game of catch, having a catch, as they say, every day for a year. And he starts sending emails to people. He starts sending letters to folks. He starts calling up people because he has to keep this thing going. He's willing to drive. He's willing to meet weird people. He's willing to play with anybody. He starts calling celebrities. He starts going to places like where the Field of Dreams movie was set and plays a game of catch there with a guy who needs to be reconciled with his father, for crying out loud. I mean, it makes you weep, this chapter about playing all right on the Field of Dreams, where that famous novel and movie were set. Ethan goes through a whole year. He happens to be a writer. He's written a couple novels. He wrote a kid's book. He wrote another memoir. He wrote a book about playing guitar because he used to be a youth minister and he plays guitar. So he has a couple of informal self-published memoirs and stories. He has a book about his dad, who is a reenactor of sorts. They go out to these camps where you get to play like a cowboy for a while. And he did that for a week with his dad, and he wrote a book about that. And it's a father-son story about this unique hobby of going to a dude ranch, and shooting and stuff. It is a wonderful, wonderful book that nobody knows about. But if you're interested, get me in touch and I'll sell it to you. But this is the one that sort of made Ethan more famous. Zondervan picked it up and released it. And here's what happened. Phil, you know a little about this, but let's tell our listeners. One time, Ethan was looking, as authors do, to see if anybody other than Hearts and Minds has reviewed this thing. And he had gotten some good reviews. He was actually on ESPN once on a Father's Day, a little episode about him. So he's getting a little bit of fame, and he likes to look to see if anywhere his name comes up, as authors do. And it came up that near him, there was a person named Ethan Bryan that was killed in a car wreck. It was a high school student, and he was coming back from baseball practice. And in the little news story, it wasn't quite the obituary, but the news story, his father even said that the boy had his glove in the car. Well, Ethan was just so struck by this. He called me up, and we even had a conversation about whether he should reach out to this dad who has a baseball playing son named Ethan Bryan. And he thought, maybe that's too much. I don't want to be hurtful. But after praying about it for a couple of days, we decided he should send him the book. He said, my name's Ethan Bryan. I saw your son's death in the news. I'm sorry, but maybe you can find some consolation in my book because I got the same name. The father called Ethan up and they become friends. And the father started playing catch in honor of his son. That became a story on ESPN. It was on the national news. It was an NBC affiliate out there. And now when people who have seen this little episode of this bereaved father playing catch with his son, inspired by the book, because he read the book and loved it, it's now become sort of a movement. Maybe you've even heard about it. You can Google this thing and watch videos of people playing catch and having meaningful conversations as they do, inspired by this book called A Year of Playing Catch by Ethan Bryan. This really does sort of just rediscover the ordinary goodness of the power of play, just what it means to have this sort of freedom to relax and enjoy something baseball related. But whether you're a big baseball fan or not, you can play catch with people. There's a story that he met a father, a Vietnam War era young man who's now my age. He has an elderly father, and they haven't talked much in years. And the young man or the middle-aged man decided he wanted to reconcile with his father, and the only thing they could do together is play catch, because they did that when they were little, when the boy was little. And he's reconciling with his father by playing catch with him after having not talked in decades. I mean, this movement of playing catch together is itself a story, but it's all based on this book. You can read the videos, you can watch the videos online, you can Google it. They are making a documentary now about this. There's a trailer out for it. I showed it at a talk I gave once just about the power of ordinary things in small town life, and this playing catch being an example. And I just used that as an example. The trailer is really powerful. And there wasn't a dry eye in the place when I showed that trailer about the power of baseball in American culture and the power of playing catch in American culture. Let's Have a Catch. He does it all over the country for a full year, and he writes this spiritually alive memoir about what he learned as he did this over the course of a year. So that's my second book, Phil, A Year of Playing Catch. You saw some of those videos, right? Did you ever see Ethan online?
Oh, yeah, I definitely saw those videos. I've followed him on the socials over the years now. And of course, it's close to my heart being a baseball fan. But even like there's a connection to this very show. The 3 Books from Hearts and Minds podcast is also hosted by Sam Levy. And he was a freshman. And I said, hey, would you like to play catch and catch up? I mean, that was one of our primary means back in my first year of campus ministry, his first year of college, that we would catch up. It wasn't every single time. We live in central PA and you can't play catch. Well, I guess you can if you're Ethan Bryan. You can play in January. But yeah, there were definitely a handful of times where he and I over the years would catch up.
I didn't know that about you and Sam. That is amazing.
Yep. And that stemmed from...
Well, yeah, Ethan carries gloves around in his cars. He gets donations from sporting outfit things, so they don't want to sponsor it really, but they donate to him. He works with underprivileged kids. He's doing a leadership thing in the public schools now, using play and recreation, mostly playing catch, to talk with sort of at-risk kids about leadership development. So he's kind of segued this into a part-time job. He's also a full-time writer. His daughter is a painter. He has another daughter that's a violinist. I mean, he's a really artsy family. I love Ethan. He used to be a youth pastor, and he was doing some outdoor education stuff with his kids, sleeping on the streets to simulate homelessness so they could care about serving the poor. It was safe and good, but parents got in an uproar about it, and he lost his job. And so all of a sudden, he's no longer a pastor, and he's scrambling to figure out what he wants to do, and he starts publishing books. So Ethan himself is a playful guy, a fun guy, cares for his church, cares for his Baptist kids, and he's an artist, a singer-songwriter, and a baseball fan of the highest order. He was all excited a couple of years ago. He got to volunteer to be in a documentary they were making about the earliest days of baseball, and they got to wear, from Cooperstown, New York, and they got to wear old uniforms, those wool uniforms that they used to wear. They got to do these outfits, and they reenacted sort of old baseball games for this documentary. So he was an extra in this documentary about baseball. He also did a feature, and he was working on a book, but he did some podcasts and stuff about the Black Baseball League's announcers. Just like there's famous sports announcers today, there were famous sports announcers that called the games for the Negro Leagues. So he knows all about that stuff too. So he's sort of a historian of the sport. But this book, A Year of Playing Catch, might inspire some people here in this broadcast to buy a book about enjoying a summer sport, playing catch. I love that book, and I highly recommend it.
And real quickly, I love the order of the books that you're presenting here, because any one of these hobbies could produce any sort of result exactly like this. And not that it's about producing the result and going viral. That's not what I mean, but more of meaning, right? Like you can crochet, you can bake cakes for the glory of God, but also for the meaningful relationships that stem from them. And that can happen on board games. Of course, it can happen with playing catch. And I love the kind of funnel effect that you brought us in those first two books of, hey, whatever it is, it's to the glory of God. And it's got its pitfalls and its ups and downs. But here's one example of following through with a hobby and going all the way with it.
Thanks for connecting those dots, Phil. You're the man. I appreciate your letting us talk about this together. Well, before people get tired of listening to us, I want to tell you about one more book. This is the 3 books from Hearts and Minds, and the third one is a little more academic. It's a little more intense, and it is an amazing, amazing book by an author I deeply respect. His name is Belden Lane, Lane, Belden Lane, and he wrote a book years ago about deserts and mountains in the Bible as a backpacker. So he is a wilderness education guy, does backpacking trips, and he looks at both desert environments and mountaintop experiences in the Bible, and he goes to those places and hikes them through. It is one of my favorite books. This book about the terrain of the Bible, the wilderness in the Bible. But then he did this next one, and that's the one I want to feature today. It's called Backpacking with the Saints. And this is a double whammy for people whose hobby is backpacking and likes wilderness excursions. But it's also for those of us that just like to read, that our hobbies are reading, because this is a book about taking books with you and encountering a particular saint, as it were, mostly Christian saints, although some other esteemed people that have something to say about a particular leg of the journey that you're on when you're backpacking. So it's a book about backpacking, and every chapter is a different, either the start of a trip, the finding of the place on the map, the terrain, the beginning, the ascent, the coming down the mountain, the hardship, the storm overnight, and then the return home when you're done with your week-long backpacking trip, when you have to kind of get back to your real life at home. So he kind of walks you through these different stages of the hobby of wilderness hiking. And in each trip that he writes about, he goes there and he tells you about it. So it's beautiful nature writing and adventure writing of the ups and downs of what happens when he goes to these places. Some of them you've heard of, most of them you haven't heard of, unless you're a backpacker, I guess. I've never heard of some of these places in the Ozarks or in Missouri or down south or in Africa. He goes to these trips, and in each one he takes a particular book and he tells you what he reads on this particular backpacking trip. So it's called Backpacking with the Saints, Wilderness Hiking as Spiritual Practice. And he opens with a chapter called The Risk-Taking Character of Wilderness Reading. And he makes the case that reading a book in a dangerous environment will give you a different reading experience than if you're reading it in your comfy chair in your living room. I think he's on to something. I read outside sometimes, and that in itself is a blessing. But taking books on trips is something many of us do. We go on vacation, we have to carry a whole box just of the books we're taking. Don't know what mood you're going to be in on Wednesday night, so you got to take a bunch of books. Many of us do that. We go on airplanes and we worry about how many books we're carrying, and then we don't read them anyway. This is something he says here. Listen to this. He goes, reading a potentially dangerous book, not the pablum of devotional stuff we often just read safely, but like serious stuff. He says, reading a dangerous book in a landscape perceived to be dangerous can be doubly hazardous. The place heightens the vulnerability occasioned by the text. Challenging books lose their bite when they're read comfortably at home in a favorite armchair. Their riskiness increases, however, when read by firelight in a forest glade 10 miles from the nearest road. He describes some different people that have read books in famous places. The biblical scholar Klaus Westermann read the Psalms in a Russian prison camp, discovering patterns that changed his life, as well as approach to biblical scholarship. Eldridge Cleaver famously read Thomas Merton in Folsom Prison. Alexander Solzhenitsyn read Dostoevsky in a Soviet cancer ward. Karl Marx read The History of Capitalism in the Elegance of the British Museum. Potentially revolutionary changes occur when people read explosive texts in unsettling places. Isn't that interesting? I just think that's so interesting. He says the stories of the saints, the classic historic saints of the Christian faith, are filled with instances of this. Isaac of Nineveh's world was turned upside down as he read the scriptures in the desert solitudes of the Zagros Mountains in 6th century Persia. He allegedly made himself blind through his constant pondering of the tear-stained pages. Near the end of his life, St. Francis of Assisi read the gospel of Christ's passion, not merely from the pages of the Bible, but within the huge split rocks atop Mount Laverna. And he talked about the splitting of the rocks when Christ was crucified. The saints often gave themselves to the outdoors, especially wilderness readings at periods of transition in their lives. St. Jerome read his Greek New Testament outside a cave in the Syrian desert before beginning his work on the Vulgate translation. Prior to being made Bishop of Lindisfarne, St. Cuthbert read the Psalms each morning standing waist deep in the surf on Northumberland's rocky coast. Hildegard of Bingen started recording her visions at the age of 42, and she and her Catholic sisters, fresh from their work in the vineyards, read the Holy Office with dirt under their fingernails. St. Bernard delighted in the valley of the Aube outside his monastery at Clairvaux as he began preaching his 86 sermons, famously on the Song of Solomon. St. Seraphus studied the Philokalia each day in the dense forests of 19th century Russia before beginning his midlife ministry to pilgrims. Well, anyway, encountering texts, even familiar ones, in unfamiliar places is a summer practice that almost any of us can do. You can grab a book and run out to the park or your backyard if you've got one. You don't have to be dramatic about it, but this book is dramatic. I'll tell you what. Here's some of the chapter titles. He talks about venturing out, and he goes to the Irish wilderness with St. Columba of Iona. And then he looks at the disillusionment that can happen when you go to a trip and it's not working out. He goes to Laramie Peak, and that's with Teresa of Lisieux. And then there's Great Desire. He goes to Rock Pile Mountain Wilderness, and he looks at Thomas Trahan, who was a great Puritan. He has a section on the second leg, which is the discipline, the actual practice of the wild. He looks at solitude by going to Bell Mountain Wilderness, which is in Missouri, and he reads Søren Kierkegaard there. And then he talks about traveling light. He goes to Gunstock Hollow, which he tells us Wilderness Magazine said is one of the most beautiful hikes in America. He didn't agree, by the way. But he goes to Gunstock Hollow and he reads Dag Hammarskjöld. He goes to Moonshine Hollow, which is a great hollow down in the Ozarks, and he reads a Buddha monk called Nick Tot Han on mindfulness. He looks at fear in the Canyonlands. He looks at Mount Whitney, and he reads Martin Luther along the way at Mount Whitney. He has a section about dying to yourself by reading The Cloud of Unknowing when he's in the Mudluck Mountain Trail. I forget where that is. So anyway, he reads this stuff about justice. He reads Gandhi in a particular Merrimack River in Times Beach. He reads Thomas Merton when he's in a particular canyon. So he has these great nature writing. And if you like reading about wilderness activities, if you like reading secondhand stories, these firsthand accounts as a secondhand reader, and I do because I don't have the energy to go out to these places. But man, I like reading this kind of stuff and the encounters he has. You'll enjoy this book. If you like these spiritual classics, you'll like this book. You put them together, it's transforming. Backpacking with the Saints, wilderness hiking as spiritual practices. He links a particular adventure with a particular book and tells about how reading that book in that place made a difference in his life. Isn't that something? That's interesting to me. Hope you enjoy it.
That's great. I don't know if I've ever put my mind to this exact context of where am I reading this? And how does that context of where I'm reading it matter? I mean, maybe a little bit in my time serving at a summer camp where like certain areas of the camp were like named Psalm 93 or something like that, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Where, but I don't know if I've intuited it or matched it into my mind. And the only
yeah,
place that my mind was going is my church that I go to. It's beautiful. It was made in the late 1800s, and it's got the stained glass windows and stuff. But I do remember going to a church in inner city Baltimore that was made hundreds of years ago and having communion there, and just
yeah,
feeling a connection to something more than me, of course, and then, of course, the communion connection itself with Jesus, but then the saints of hundreds of years of worship happening in this church with
yeah,
its high liturgy. And so my mind started to go there of, oh yeah, there was something else, not something more per se, but
yeah,
something else added to my communion experience when I was in this very high church feel from hundreds of years ago with the bell tower and the
yeah, yeah,
so there's something to that of like that's got me cooking on, oh, I need to think a little bit more about where it is I read certain things and where I'm going and what I
yeah.
could read too, that going that direction as well, that I really appreciate you bringing to the fore with this book review, Byron.
We could do a 3 books sometime on books about place, about
Sure.
the way you feel in certain places, the way the uprooted nature of modern culture displaces us from place. And there's wonderful books about caring for your locale, for your buildings, for the nature of place, the sociology of place. There's a whole lot of really great books about this sort of geography we find ourselves in. But I thought this one was fun because it's about hiking. Some of us do little outdoor hikes, maybe not as dramatic, going to Mount Rainier or places like he goes here. But reading the Saints alongside this journey of outdoor wilderness education, man, it's just a thrilling book, and I like it a lot. And I just thought people would get a kick out of it. If your summer habits are doing any hiking at all, you'll enjoy this. And if you're interested in reading some of the mystics and saints, it's a fresh way to read about them instead of reading the primary source stuff. Jamie Smith's most recent book, Make Your Home in This Luminous Dark, is one of my favorite books of the season, where he's inviting people to read these classic mystics. Well, reading them by Belden Lane's take on them is even better. So I'm really excited about that. I think all 3 of these could be fun to read in the summertime. Get outside and play some catch, have some games, and do some reflecting with spiritual reading, even while you're in the outdoors. Can't go wrong with this stuff, man. So thanks for letting me talk about them today.
Well, thank you, Byron. It's always a blast talking about not only the 3 books, but where all the our conversations go in these other ways and directions as well. It's always a blast, and I hope it's a blast for you, the listener, as well. And if it has been, please do leave us a review, make comments on the platforms that you're listening in on, and share these episodes. That helps us in our ability to get the word out there about these books, about what God is doing through these books and these communities as well. If you're interested in any of these books, just remember that they are 20% off anything that was mentioned here in this episode. And the link to order those books is the first link that you will see in the show description. And of course, as you read these books, feel free to reach out to us. We've got our contact at the bottom of the show description, and we'd love to hear from you and love your thoughts and be able to build the community around what it means to engage both your heart and your mind in reading and reading widely for the kingdom's sake. So with that, on behalf of Byron and Hearts and Minds, as well as myself and the CCO, thanks for listening to another episode of the 3 Books from Hearts and Minds podcast.